Hi there. Good afternoon. My name is Danny Fitzgerald. I'm the regional director for the San Diego and Imperial Small Business Development Center Network. We are funded by the Small Business Administration as well as the state of California. And our mission, of course, is to help small businesses in all sorts of different ways. And one of the most primary ways is, of course, is accessing capital. One of the core issues that oftentimes comes up is how to finance when you get a particular contract, be that from a corporation, from a governmental entity, and so forth. That is oftentimes one of the trickiest things to be able to finance. And so we have a fantastic organization that can talk about ways to be able to finance that. And that's from a great partner here in San Diego called Primary Funding. And so I'm just going to turn it over to our experts. And so in particular, Fernando, that's here, and he'll be able to kind of kick things off. Just quick housekeeping. Go ahead and please keep yourself on mute during the presentation. We'll also be monitoring the chat and be able to answer the questions towards the end, and be able to have that as well. And we will send out a copy of recording of this as well as a copy of the presentation. So Fernando, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Danny. Appreciate the introduction. So I'll go ahead and just start off by sharing my screen here so we can jump right in here. All right, there we go. Well, again, thank you everybody for joining us. Today's presentation is cash flow solutions for your business. My name is Fernando Ponce with Primary Funding. We partner very regularly with the SBDC. We're actually a sponsor of the SBDC, so big fans of what the organization does, and very heavily involved with their efforts to provide capital to small businesses. So what's on the agenda for today? So we'll be going over a few different things. To start off, we'll give you a quick background on who Primary Funding is. We'll talk a little bit about the cash crunch problem, provide one of the solutions, factoring, give you a little bit of a description on how it works, who it helps, and some real life examples. We'll also have question and answers at the end. During the presentation, if you have any questions, you're welcome to type them into the chat as well. Jeff will be monitoring the chat and keeping track of that, and potentially providing some answers when we take some breaks here. But again, at the end, we will allow you to have some Q&A at the very end. So just a quick introduction on myself. Again, Fernando Ponce. I am a regional development officer for Primary Funding. Been with the company about 3.5 years now. I actually worked for a big bank previously. I worked for Chase Bank. Was with them for almost 11 years. Managed a portfolio of clients there, over 100 clients. Did everything for them from managing their deposit accounts, their treasury services. Actually managed all their loans as well in my portfolio. So I ended up being the one point of contact for any clients that were in my portfolio during my time at Chase. And then I also serve now on the board of California Southern, which is a guarantee program similar to the SBA guarantee program, but it's run by the state of California. I'll let my co-host here, Dan, introduce himself.
Yeah, thanks, Fernando. My name is Daniel Lozier. I am the Director of Sales and Marketing here at Primary Funding. A little bit of background on me. Did a short stint in commercial banking, similar to Fernando. Worked at California Bank and Trust here locally, but the large majority of my career has been spent actually at Primary Funding. I've held virtually every role at the organization. Started on the operations side as an account executive, did a handful of years of underwriting and handling applications for new prospective clients. Worked on the business development side, and now 9-10 years later, here I am working on the BD, overseeing the sales marketing side, and then acting or sitting as a management team. Again, over my experience here, just worked with well over 100, if not hundreds of small businesses, and tried to help provide them financing solutions. I'm a San Diego guy through and through, so definitely like to invest and try to help out the community. And currently I'm serving as a financial mentor with San Diego Sports Innovators, which is a part of Connected.
Awesome, thank you, Dan. So a little background on primary funding, and keep in mind that also we will be having a little bit of a trivia at the end. So pay attention to some of these items that we bring up here. We'll be giving out some gift cards at the end. So who we are, right? Primary funding was actually founded in 1995. I stress that again, 1995. That's when primary funding, or PFC as we like to call it sometimes, actually came into existence. It was started up by a woman named Pat Burns, who was actually really a like a trailblazer in the industry. There weren't very many women in factoring at that time, or any in the finance community. And so for her to actually be a part of it and then start her own company, and it's lasted this long, was a pretty cool story actually, and one of the things that really drew me to primary funding as well. We really strive to fill a niche. Most of our business comes from banks. And so when typically a bank cannot provide financing, traditional financing to a business, they tend to call us. We have long lasting relationships with many banks in the community, and they turn to us a lot of times to provide that financing, and really to be a bridge back to the bank at some point, right? With the intent for us is really to help you, get you the capital you need, and then eventually work with you and get you to the point where you can transition back to a bank, or to a bank for the first time.
Yeah, so founded back in 1995, huh? 26 years in business. I know, speaking for Jeff and Fernando and myself, I mean, that's something that we all at Primary Funding are really proud of. Again, we are not a fly-by-night organization. We've spent years developing relationships. I mean, we're connecting with organizations like SBDC to give back and really try to be a resource for individuals like yourself and small businesses here in San Diego. As Fernando was talking about, I mean, we are considered alternative financing. So alternative to what, generally speaking, that means to traditional banks like a Chase or Wells Fargo or B of A, or alternatively, we can be a solution to help growth and people that are looking to raise equity. I think more importantly, again, just being a resource. The slogan on there at the bottom, "We care about your business's growth and success," resonates with all of us. And we, more than anything, want to be a relationship and a resource for you guys. So as Fernando talked about earlier on, we'd love this to be interactive, educational. Please, ask your questions in the chat. If we're talking technically and things aren't making sense, please let us know. We want to make sure that we're adding value to you guys here in this presentation.
Absolutely. That leads us into our next slide here. So, what makes us different? I mean, being local is great. You have the ability to reach out to us directly. You can actually come to our office if need be. We are a direct lender, so that means we are using our own capital to make these decisions. And that gives us the flexibility, right, to structure things in a way that are going to make sense. It's not a one size fits all. It never is, in my experience in financing. So the more creative and flexible a company can be, typically the better the solutions are going to be for the borrowers in the long term. Designated account, lasting relationships. That's another thing. I mean, you're going to do business with people in the end, right? So it's important that you build relationships, and as we get to know the businesses better, we can tend to really stretch on what we do and make, products that are more and more user-friendly to the borrower. One of the great things is that we have in-house account managers. They really get to know you. They understand you. They can make decisions, on how to help you out when we're providing that funding. They'll come back and give us that feedback, directly on a case-by-case. So that's a huge thing. I don't want to understate that at all. And that just kind of goes along with everything I'm saying, positive problem-solving attitude. We always try to figure out the best solution, right? That's one of the things I think we like to hang our hat on as a company.
Yeah, I think this webinar, we're really talking about one of our primary product offerings, that's factoring, and obviously we'll get into that later on in the webinar. But just to piggyback off of what Fernando said, and it's really relationship. Again, we're here to help service you guys and help you guys get to the next level, whatever their growth objectives may be. Again, we believe in the relationships. We believe in being a resource. And again, one of the things that we pride ourselves on is just understanding from not only a financial standpoint, but also from just our experience of working and helping with small to mid-sized businesses, just the unique challenges that you guys will encounter on a day-to-day basis. And so again, I mean, I think Fernando is going to provide his contact information at the end of this, and certainly feel free to reach out to myself. But I mean, come to us, and you know, if it's not a situation that we can't help out directly, I mean, we will absolutely do our best to point you in the right direction, and you know, make introductions to people that we've worked with in the past and have developed trustworthy relationships with.
Yeah, well said, Dan. So this leads us to, you know, what the webinar is about today. So the problem we solve. The cash crunch, right? So cash flow is the lifeline of a business, really, right? We tend to run into many business owners that either, you know, are starting up and maybe don't have the capital to bootstrap and bankroll, you know, the business when they get going. Sometimes we run into businesses that have been around for years and they just happen to, you know, sometimes 10 years in the business, they're kind of putting along, and then boom, they hit a huge contract, right? And suddenly they have to scale in a very short amount of time. So those are situations that we run into pretty regularly also that end up leading to a cash flow crunch. And then other scenarios are where you're doing the work, but you're getting paid on terms, right? So you got 30, 60, 90 days sometimes, and it's causing problems for you. So on this next slide here, you'll actually see, you know, a nice little cash flow cycle here. I'd love to see if anybody, you know, you can throw this in the chat, or you can even jump in here if you want. But so you have, you know, step one where the PO is issued. Step two where you procure or source the supplies, raw materials. Step three, you deliver on the product. Step four, you invoice, and now you're waiting for step five where you receive payment, right? So this is typically a cash flow cycle that we see. And I'd love to hear, you know, just some feedback on where you think the typical cash crunch issues come for businesses in this particular cycle. And again, you're welcome to throw it in the chat, or you can even unmute and just throw out a number on here that you think could potentially be a cash flow crunch. Man, is everybody shy today?
Maybe between 2 and 3.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, step two right here, you're putting cash out, and now you're waiting to invoice even, or to finish the work and receive payment. So definitely step two is one of the places that we really see the cash flow crunch come in. Is there any other sections where you guys think there could be a potential cash flow crunch on here?
So, and Fernando, we had one comment in the messages that said cash crunch during hiring. I'm not sure where that would fall in.
Yeah, definitely. That is an issue we see a lot when companies are having extreme growth. So where that would probably fall here is potentially even right at step one, right, where you're awarded a contract, and you know, between like step 1 and 2, you're awarded a contract, and maybe you don't have the manpower to actually perform on it, right? So that can definitely be an issue there.
I want to put in a personal experience as all of a sudden trying to hire people, and but also having to find workman's comp and somebody to provide you with you know, all of the government mandated certificates and taxes that you have to get is tough too. That makes it a longer process that you don't think about sometimes.
Absolutely.
Good point.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, thank you, Jonathan, for that. There's definitely a lot of red tape, right, that goes along with things that you don't even see. You know, you kind of think of it, here's the problem, but then there's a lot of little things that tend to follow it. So as we jump into our next slide, this really just kind of illustrates and points out where we tend to see most of the issues with cash flow in this particular cycle, right? So step 2 is exactly where it typically starts. Then as you get into 3 and 4, it just intensifies here, right? Between 3 and 4, because now you've completed the work, you've procured that product, or if you're in a service-based business, you might not even have a step 2. You're really, you know, step 2 is really just doing the work, you know, potentially having to hire those employees. And so this is where you really see, you're waiting at step 4 now to get paid, and now you're waiting 30, 60, even 90 days from beginning of number 2 to the end of number 5 where you get paid. We've seen this particular cycle last, upwards of 120 days at some point. So really causes some cash flow issues for businesses. And payroll, paying your vendors, all those things, keeping good relationship with your vendors, all of those relationships can really be stressed during this period.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think it's important to highlight here is, if we look at from steps 4 to 5 and why, you invoice your customer, you've delivered on the product, you've, spent all the money to get it sourced, manufactured, logistics, you deliver. And now all of a sudden, well, why would your clients be taking 30, 60, or 90 days to pay? I mean, they should be paying once it's been delivered. What ends up happening is if I'm a small company that's starting off, I'm, selling to friends, families, maybe selling some units online, and that is all getting paid promptly. And then I wake up the next day and let's just say Costco comes knocking on the door and says, "Hey, Dan, you know what? I love your product. We want to put it in all of our West Coast stores. We're going to place an order for 100,000 of your units." I mean, I'm scaling rapidly. I'm doing backflips about this new revenue that I have coming in. And then at the end of the conversation, Mr. Costco looks at me and says, "And by the way, I'm going to wait to after you deliver, I'm going to wait and pay you 60 days after you've actually delivered to my warehouse." And me being a small business and not in a position to negotiate with a large box retailer like Costco, kind of have to sit there and say, "Okay, Costco, I mean, I'm going to deliver this. I'm going to spend a bunch of money to manufacture these units. And then you can, once I deliver it and you're starting to sell on your shelves, then you can pay me in 60 days. And so that process is what's known as, customer repayment terms of your customers actually negotiating some delays and when they're going to pay you once you've actually delivered the product. And that can range anywhere from 30, 60, or 90 days. And so that process is really can be a huge cash crunch for a lot of businesses. And so I just wanted to highlight kind of step 4 and 5 and why that might occur there.
Yeah, absolutely. Waiting for your money, the waiting game. So what's the solution, right? So one of the solutions is a product called factoring. So of course, most clients that we come across, they want a line of credit, right? It's like, "Hey, I want a line of credit, something to help me bridge between my receivables and, when I get paid, I need to pay my vendors and do all these things." And ideally, that's what everybody wants and would be able to get, right? So you want to go to your bank and say, "Hey, I need a line of credit." They'll get you set up. There are going to be scenarios where you may not qualify. Could be because you don't have enough time in business. Could be because maybe you don't cash flow, based on how the bank, the formula they use for your profits and, money coming in and money going out. Could also be maybe you had some credit issues. Another one that people don't really think about too much is concentration, right? So what concentration is when you have all your eggs in one basket, right? So maybe you have a contract with the federal government, or maybe like Dan said earlier, Costco, right? You would think these contracts are, gold, right? I mean, when is the federal government not going to pay me? Or Costco's good for it. So, but if let's say 90% of your receivables are with one of these entities, no matter how good it is, it poses a risk to the lender, because if for some reason you were to lose that contract, they would be in a position where they would not really be able to recoup that money anymore, because your ability to repay will have been diminished significantly, right? So factoring is a product that really is able to mitigate all of those issues, because we are basing our decision on the strength of that contract, as you would think. And we have a way to do that by advancing on specific invoices, right? So it's a financial transaction and type of debtor finance in which business sells its accounts receivable to a third party at a discount. Business will sometimes factor its receivables assets to meet its present and immediate cash needs, right? So that's the thing I want you to kind of remember on there. The business will sometimes factor its receivables, which are their assets, to meet its present and immediate cash needs. So we turn those invoices into cash.
Yeah, it's and again, this is part of the technical jargon, but we have a very technical definition, and again, just to try to reiterate what Fernando was saying and put it into plain English or something that is digestible for everybody, even myself, is really what we're talking about. If we think about your business, is you guys are providing a product or service and selling that product or service. So you're generating revenue. If you are negotiating, or if your customers are negotiating customer repayment terms with you, that means that you're generating revenue, invoicing them, and then that invoice, it's not cash because they haven't paid you for it yet. It's money that is still owed to you. That invoice goes into on your balance sheet and shows up as an asset to your to your company from that on the actual balance sheet itself. Now, it's very positive. You're growing, you're generating revenue. The asset composition of your company is growing. The problem is, again, if you're in a high growth scenario, if you're hiring employees, what Jonathan was talking about earlier, if you need to pay insurance or pay workers' comp, and you have this asset on owed to your company, but can't access the cash, it doesn't do you any good. And so really what we're doing is taking that asset and turning it into liquid cash. So you can pay your suppliers, you can make payroll, you can invest in hiring new employees, you can utilize the money for any sort of your operating and general working capital expenses. But you look at, what we're specifically doing, and if we tailor it to, as an example, a very high growth scenario where, again, you've depleted your cash to invest into generating and fulfilling an invoice, you've fulfilled the invoice, you have this asset in the form of accounts receivables on your balance sheet, you're sitting there, and then all of a sudden a new company comes and says, hey, you know what, guys, we love what you're doing. Can you deliver us another 100,000 units? Again, a great opportunity, great growth scenario, but now you don't have any cash in your account to take advantage of this growth opportunity. So how do you do that? And again, what Fernando was talking about is one option is to go to a traditional bank like a Wells Fargo or a Chase, but some of their underwriting parameters just kick out a lot of companies, especially companies that are in rapid growth or startup or fairly newer companies. The other thing that you guys can look at too is maybe raising equity, but then that means that you guys have to give up 50+% of your company at times, and that can be far more expensive. So really, again, the factoring is taking that asset, the specific accounts receivables, turning that into cash today so you can use that cash to take advantage of growth opportunities. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and Dan and Fernando, Jonathan has a question for you.
Sure.
So I'm going to unmute him here.
Yes, thank you. So is it you use the invoice basically like a promissory note or like something like that?
Yeah, Fernando, do you want to answer that or?
Yeah. We're actually, essentially what we're doing is we're purchasing the invoice from you, right? So you've completed that work, and we're really just setting up a kind of a blanket, facility on the business. And then we're in advance, we're approving that client, right? So your customer, as you hear the term sometimes used called a debtor, which is your customer is our debtor, right? So we'll approve them beforehand and set a line, an amount that we can finance invoices up to. And so once you've completed that work, you submit that invoice to us, we just verify it, and we can advance up to a certain percentage of that invoice. So we're essentially just purchasing that invoice, converting it into cash immediately so that you can use that to go ahead and pay your obligations. And we just do that over and over again with whatever invoices you want to that we've approved those customers or debtors beforehand.
Forwarding it like, okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's actually a really great question, Jonathan. Thank you for your participation. The interaction is great. Yeah, I mean, again, just to kind of piggyback off what Fernando was saying, essentially, I mean, factoring is, you said a promissory note, it has some of the similar characteristics as a promissory note, but factoring is not debt. So we are not providing actual debt, nor are we like loading up the liability section for your company's for your company. Again, what we're doing is actually selling, like as you would sell a piece of equipment for cash, that similar transaction. Again, you have that asset. We're buying that specific asset from you at a very small discount. And so one of the things one of the actual terms in manufacturing industry when you're selling to large box retailers is something called quick pay terms. I'm not sure if anybody's ever heard of them, but an example of a quick pay term is 2% net 10. And so that's specifically what we're doing, right? We're buying that invoice from you at a very short discount, but it is a buying and selling transaction of a specific asset, if that makes sense.
Yep. So I'll move to the next slide here, just kind of shows an example of how this works, right? So basically here in step 4, right, when your invoice and everything else is the same, but this is where we're able to monetize those invoices and provide capital to you so that you don't have to wait, right? So instead of waiting those 30, 60, 90 days, you're now getting that cash up front. You're able to pay off your vendors, pay your employees, cover whatever overhead you have, and just keep the process going, and then potentially roll some of that cash into the next project, right? We run into a lot of situations where companies are growing too quickly and they don't have the ability to monetize or to wait on their receivables because they're basically turning away business, right? Because they can't afford the growth. And so by monetizing those receivables, you can actually roll that into the next project. You don't have to say no, potentially to other contracts that you're looking at. You're able to just continue to kind of crank that system through and push through this cash flow cycle here in a much more efficient manner.
So
Fernando, there's a question here, and it's somewhat long, so I'm just going to read it.
Okay.
So what I understand about factoring is that I'll sell my invoices to you, and your company buys my invoices at a discount. Whatever expected profit will go to you. I'll be able to have cash, but I'll just be spending my invoices and just working for you. A small business will be out of business in a short time, for my product, capital, energy, and time is just handed because of a cash flow crunch, like Barclays of London.
Got it. No, that's a great question, and absolutely, I appreciate the the critique, or look, the factoring is not a product for every business, right? So we want to make sure, number one, when we are vetting out the relationship to see if it's going to make sense, we want to look at your gross margins, right? That's one of the main things that we're going to look at, just to make sure that we aren't going to be hurting the company, right? Because at the end of the day, if you're in a very low margin business, factoring will not be a good option for you. I can tell you that up front, and we would just tell you, hey, you know what, this isn't going to be a good relationship for you, because we are literally going to be taking all your profits, and the scenario that you just presented will actually come true. So one of the things that we do is we really look at margins. We want to make sure that the business, and that's why we'll go into a little bit later the types of businesses that typically work best for this, but they're going to be B2B industries, and they're going to have good margins. Companies that either do manufacturing or some type of distribution, where the margins that you have built into your business can absorb the cost, and it's not going to affect the business. Because if you think about it, if you have margins in the let's say 20% range, right, and you're paying us let's say 2% of the invoice, that's a good deal, right? If you can 2 or 3 or 4x your business at that top line number, and you're only giving away a small percentage, but your margins are significantly higher in relation to that, it makes sense for you, right? And something I equate this to is, a lot of companies on the retail side, they take credit cards, and what do? They pay the credit card company a percentage of what they process, right? Sometimes it's 2%, sometimes it's 3%, just depends on the card type. But these companies don't go out of business, right? Because they have good margins, they can absorb the cost of that processing, and it just makes it without the credit card sales, they would actually have less business, right? So that's how you really have to think about this. And if your margins are incredibly low, then yes, this would not be a good scenario for you. You might have to look at actually borrowing from friends and family, or maybe raising equity or something like that.
So Fernando, what would you say is the low end of the gross profit margin that would fit for factoring? You said 20%, or would it be down to 15% gross margin, or what?
It really just depends on the scenario, because we've had some government contractors that really have a business model that is based on they're procuring a product from a company and providing it to the government. Sometimes the last one we did like that, their margins were fairly low. I think they were at around 8%. And we ended up costing them about 2% of their invoices. Now, in this scenario, it made sense for them because they had zero overhead. Okay, they were literally procuring a product, placing the order. It was shipped directly to the end user, and so everything that they had built into their margins was 100% profit. So for them, it actually made sense to say, hey, I'm gonna lose 2% or whatever it was on this, but I'm gonna keep the 6%. And without this financing program, I would not have actually even been able to make this deal happen, right? So I don't want to say there's a specific number, because it's going to be different for every business. As I said, earlier on in the presentation, it's not a one size fits all. But I would just encourage you, if you're a lower profit or lower margin business, we can have the conversation and just really do the math and see if it's going to make sense. I think that would be the best course of action. It wouldn't be fair for me to say, oh, if you're at this point, it'll make sense, because there are companies that might be at 20% gross profit margins, but when they're all said and done and they're paid all their other overhead, maybe their actual net margins are significantly lower, and it doesn't even make sense anymore, right?
So just real quick, John, thank you for the question, and hopefully you're feeling better after the thyroid surgery, but definitely appreciate your participation. I would just be curious, because a lot of times when you when you typed in, whatever expected profit will go to you being us primary funding, what were you thinking? Because there's a pretty big misconception out in the marketplace, but what do you think our costs are going to be? Did you think that a lot of times I hear people saying, oh, you guys take 20% of the invoice or 25% of the invoice. Is that what you were thinking from like a cost standpoint, that it would cost about like 20 or 25%? And again, I know you can't really talk, but again, it's, for some reason there's confusion, and factoring gets lumped into the, alternative finance space or the MCA space. And so a lot of people think that there's just this really high cost to it. Again, like, people have talked to me and saying, man, you guys are charging 15% of my invoice. This doesn't make any sense. And that's definitely not the case. I mean, to Fernando's point, on average, our clients are paying 2% of an invoice. And so when we're looking at that and saying, okay, in a 20% gross profit margin business, does it make sense for me to sacrifice 2% on this invoice? So now my margin on one invoice goes from 20 to 18%. But then I can roll that money over and grow and add additional revenue at 20%. So it's a great question. Again, if you want to chat or type into the chat, I'd love to just know what you were thinking our costs would be, because a lot of times that's something that's confused with a lot of people, just the overall cost.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, Jonathan, did you have a question?
Yes. Well, I think that as I understood, the question was that, like, basically, you would. I think they understood it as you would take all of the profit, but it still enables you to do the work for reporting purposes, or say that you references or something like that. I think that was the question, but what you said really cleared it up too, because I think other people might have thought that also, like just basically allowing the company to do the work to say they've done it without really making anything off of it.
Yeah, no, and definitely not the case. So I'll roll into the next slide here too, but now our goal is, and keep in mind, guys, I mean, we have been around for a long time, right? So I think that says a lot. It doesn't say everything, but it says a lot. A company like ours that is going to exist for over 25 years, if we were really doing that to companies and just squeezing them for all their profits, I mean, it just wouldn't make sense. The market wouldn't, it wouldn't support it. So we really go into this as a partnership. We try to understand the business, try to make sure that it's a good fit. And factoring might not always be the right fit. And that's where, again, we're flexible, and we'll try to do other things if that's not, if that's not the best solution. Just to keep this going as well, because I know I want to definitely stay within the 1 hour time frame. But so use of funds, once we actually convert those invoices into cash, it's really up to you. I mean, the flexibility is there. You can take that capital, cover your payroll, pay your vendors, make sure you keep those relationships in good standing. Jonathan, as you said earlier, hire employees, all of those things, you can actually roll that cash into whatever you need to do. We don't put any restraints on that. Again, it's your capital. We're just giving you the ability to leverage it up front as opposed to having to wait to get that money in your bank account.
Yeah, again, Fernando, I definitely want to be mindful of our time. So let me know, do we kind of are we running out of time here?
No, I think we're still good. We've got about 10 to 15 minutes here still before we go into the chat. So I'll let you actually run with this one, Dan, our profile and, typical, kind of profile of our client.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I kind of just wanted to touch on too, the last slide, the uses of funds, and Jeff, I think we were kind of talking about, okay, well, all the examples and what we've really been talking about relates to like manufacturing, wholesale, very tangible products. And so what about if I'm providing a service to somebody, and if we think about growth opportunities and really, again, that step number 2 in an operating cycle of procurement and needing to pay suppliers. Well, in a professional service industry, I mean, the suppliers, well, there aren't any really suppliers, maybe you're outsourcing the work, but the suppliers really is the labor force. And so again, if we think about a situation where you have to make payroll on a weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly basis, your employees' hours is what you're having to outlay cash for. You complete a project in a month's time, so that means that you would have to have enough cash on hand to cover a month's worth of payroll. Now you're invoicing your customer, and they're taking 30 or 60, 90 days to pay. So now, on top of just being able to fulfill the contract itself, now you're looking at, because of the customer repayment terms, you're having to look at needing cash on hand to float 2, 3, potentially 4 months worth of payroll. So when we think about, again, high growth scenarios, you maybe have enough cash to cover that one operating cycle, but what happens if somebody else comes and wants you to do business or work for them and service a contract? Now you're having to, again, to Jonathan's point and John's point earlier, now you're having to hire new employees, which means increased payroll, which means increased cash outlay. So again, uses of fund, when we talk about payroll, I mean, that's a really big use of funds that we see a lot of our clients needing, because human capital, you need to add employees to take advantage of growth opportunities. And then just to kind of segue into here, again, I mean, factoring is a very flexible financing solution because we are solely looking at the company's accounts receivables. We can help companies that are starting up to companies that have been in business for 25 plus years or 30 years. A couple parameters for us that we look for is, the business, the owners, and the customers are located in the United States. We have some flexibility if it's, selling to Canadian entities, or, if you're selling to a large retailer. One example that comes to mind is a client selling to a large, like TJ Maxx, both in the United States and Europe. I mean, in those situations, we can help, but generally speaking, we want to make sure that, the business owners and the actual customers you're selling to are located in the United States. And again, we are factoring the product that we're talking about now is really dependent or only dependent on your company's accounts receivables. So in order to qualify for this product, you need to make sure that you're selling to or have business to business sales, also known as B2B sales, and generating accounts receivables. But those are really just kind of the main criteria points. Again, we are not a traditional bank, so we don't look at, minimum FICO scores. We're not looking at operating history. We're not looking at, is your company, the leverage profile of the company, the profitability, the debt to income, all of that stuff kind of goes out the window for us. So we are able to be far more flexible than a traditional bank. Again, companies that are B2B, generating accounts receivables. I mean, some of the common industries that we service are manufacturing, wholesale distribution, temporary staffing, covering those payroll costs, professional service providers, technology, and certainly, as Danny was talking about early on in the webinar, government contracts. That tends to be a challenging space.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on the government contracts, that's one that we really enjoy working with. It's difficult for a lot of banks to provide financing to government contractors, and the reason behind that is it's a very niche process to finance government contracts. There's actually we can help you through that process as well if that's something you're going into. There's certain ways that when you bid on contracts, there's certain boxes you need to check off that allow the contracts to be assignable. And so once you do that, it's actually written into the contract that you can use and leverage those receivables. But without that little clause being in there, it makes it very difficult to, just to use AR from the government at all, because the federal government does not allow, they don't kind of conform to the UCC code, which gives lenders rights to go after those receivables down the line if in the case of a default. But if you have questions about that, we can definitely go a little bit more into it. Or you had a quick question there, Jonathan?
Yes. Can you email this this slideshow to us, or is it going to be available? Okay.
Yeah, we will definitely make it available to everybody at the end. We'll send it out. So jumping in.
May I ask a question, please?
Yes.
I came on a little late. My apologies. I just incorporated a brand new hospice in the state of California, and I'm in Oceanside, California. And I'm in the process of trying to figure out how to fund my business. We will be working with Medicare and getting paid by Medicare. We're going through a whole process for a state application. There is a moratorium on hospices effective December 31st. So the first phase of our operation is to get licensed, and after that we'll get accredited. Would we be a kind of a company that would be something that you could fund?
Yeah, great question. So I know we actually do have experience with some of these in the medical industry. It's definitely a little bit more complicated due to DACA and some other regulations around that. As you just kind of mentioned, it's a very highly regulated industry. So yeah, I'd love to have a further conversation with you on that one. There are options, but I just want to kind of lay out what that looks like, because it is definitely a more complicated process. We typically are having to bring in one of our funding partners that we work with that really specializes in that particular industry, just because it's so niche and there's so many regulations on that end that make it difficult, to provide financing in an efficient way. So yeah, happy to answer more questions on those if you want to set up a time to just chat a little bit.
Yeah, I would like to. It would be great. It's a big process we're involved in, and we need some help. We've got a good team together. We have years of experience and vision. We just need to be able to get to the point where we can be up and operational and bill Medicare. And as you may know, there's a gap in terms of when you can bill versus when you're providing the services. And that's our main challenge. That's why most people don't open up hospices, because it's extremely expensive.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. We went through that recently with another client, and I think they're over 6 months in and they still have not received their first payment. So just to give you an idea, I mean, it takes, I understand that it definitely is a lengthy process. So moving on to the next slide, we'll kind of, we are starting to run short on time. So I'm going to go through these here, and we'll leave some time at the end if there are any additional questions. But these are just really some examples of clients that we've helped here recently. So we had a manufacturer of consumer goods. What the problem was, they got large purchase order from a national retailer, needed working capital to help fill the orders. Retail offered net 45 payment terms. The client needed cash to pay the factory to continue production on the orders, but could not wait for the invoices to pay. To add, a little bit more complexity to it, the client only had 9 months of operating history and would not qualify for traditional bank financing. So this was a perfect scenario for us to come in and provide a factoring facility to help them to speed up that that cash flow cycle, help them to get their vendors paid. Because especially when you're a newer company, you tend to get, scrutinized a little bit more closely by your vendors, right? Because you don't have a ton of history there. So they tend to say, hey, we really want our money now. Sometimes they want it right up front. If you're lucky, you can negotiate some terms. And so really in the early stages, businesses, it's really important that you're creating really good relationships with your vendors, and this can really help to do that. So next one here. So we actually had a government contractor that we helped recently as well. They were awarded a large procurement contractor, needed cash to buy heavy equipment for a local government entity. They didn't have the cash to do that up front. They had plenty of accounts receivables. Customer had net 90 terms for net 90. So with this one was a little bit different. Even we actually helped to provide some cash up front. So we do from time to time, especially on the government side, provide what's called PO financing, where we actually take the purchase order into consideration and help you cover the cost of goods. It's a little bit more complicated, and it's a longer process. And so, it's something that we really need a little bit more time in business for, but it is something that we could potentially look at as well if we're unable to, for some reason, just monetize your receivables to get you the cash to roll into that project. We may have an option where we actually look at the specific PO and provide financing on that. All right, so we're pretty much at the end here, so we'll just go in and leave a few minutes for Q&A. If anybody has any specific questions that they have that we were unable to get to, or maybe didn't have a chance to ask earlier, please feel free to throw them out now.
Does the nature of the entity matter, whether it's a corporation or an LLC? In our case, we're a corporation S Corp.
No, great question. It really doesn't. Where that can get a little bit tricky sometimes is with sole proprietorships. It can make it a little bit difficult, but it's not outside of the question. But with respect to an LLC or a corporation, yeah, it won't have any bearing on our ability to provide financing.
And typically, what are your interest rates for financing? May I ask the range?
Yeah, so great question. I mean, it really depends on the duration. So when we're talking about factoring, we're typically looking at anywhere between 2 to 4%, just depending on the duration, right? Because the longer the capital is out, the more we're going to have to charge, because it costs us more to have it out, right? So on average, our clients typically pay somewhere around 2 to 2.5% of an invoice when we provide factoring. But again, each case is different. Some invoices turn in, like 10 days, and there's some that turn in 90 days, right? So just depending on what those turn times are, it's going to really dictate, where you're going to be on the pricing. And we will actually provide that information up front. We're very transparent in how we put proposals together. So you'll know exactly, what it's going to cost you based on the timeout. We make sure to make that very transparent in all of our proposals.
And when it comes to a corporation, how do you guys leverage? Do you do it with shares or stocks, or how does that work?
Dan, you want to take that one?
Yeah, so again, factoring is actually, what we do is actually an alternative to equity or capital raises. Really what we're doing is buying your company's asset, the specific asset being your accounts receivables, which your invoices make up your accounts receivables, if that makes sense. So it's actually not considered debt. It's not equity. We don't take any equity position or any sort of convertible note on the company. It's literally we're buying your company's AR to help generate and speed up your company's cash flow, if that makes sense.
So when you said 2%, what you were talking about is 2% of the overall company's cash flow within the period that the money that is lent?
No. So, go ahead, Fernando.
Oh yeah, no, great question. So yeah, that sounds more like what are called MCA lenders, where they really take a percentage of the total revenue to pay back. So we're just charging a percentage of the invoice itself, right? So if the invoice, invoice or invoices, right? Because it can be more than one. You send us an invoice for $10,000 worth of invoices. 2% of that would be a couple $100, right? So that's really what you're looking at as far as the way we charge a fee. It's transactional. So as you provide an invoice. We've already set your rates up. You know how long how much it's going to be for 30, 60, 90 days. And we really try to tailor it to your business and how you get paid. So maybe you're getting paid consistently at 45 days. We'll set it up to where it makes more sense at around a 45-day rate. And it's really just discounting that invoice by that percentage when it's paid. And that's how we collect our fee.
Okay, so do you give the money up front so that the company can float itself until it's able to invoice? Is that how that works?
Well, it's once you've invoiced, right? So you've completed the work, you have an invoice, but you're going to get paid on 30, 60, or 90-day terms. So that's where we step in and we actually purchase that invoice from you. And we've done the underwriting on the front end, so we already know who you're doing business with. We know if they're credit worthy. We know typically what kind of terms they pay on. We've already done all that work on the front end. And when you submit that invoice, we just advance a percentage of that invoice. It might be 80%, might be 85%. And you will get that in working capital and use it for what you need. And then once the invoice pays, we discount our fee off of that and keep the process going.
I see. So I would be asking for funding from you folks when I'm at phase 2, which is accreditation, and between the time that I get my Medicare provider number, because I would be providing services and I can't bill for them. And then I would be able to bill for them after that period of time. Is that when I would ask for your assistance, or would I be able to ask for your assistance while I was waiting for my Medicare number?
So as a direct lender, yeah, we would really step in once you have the ability to invoice. If you need some capital on the front end, I mean, I'm happy to, so we can have a more in-depth conversation. There might be some other programs that we can help. And also, quite frankly, the SBDC would be a great resource for you to schedule a time with their advisors, because they tend to actually be really experts on helping you. If you need seed capital, they have a ton of resources that they can connect you with if that's more of what you're looking for right now. And then once you get to that point where you're able to invoice, that's when we can come in and really help you to scale the business.
I'm going to keep you in mind for that. We're already working with SBDC, a couple of specialists that are very helpful. But yeah, we're going to keep you in mind because we're going to probably need that money for that gap. I think there's a gap in payment. We might need that boost at that time.
Got it. Okay.
Fernando, just to also clarify too, we do work with sole proprietors. I know as a startup company, I mean, that's just the logical place to start from an entity formation standpoint. The requirements that we look at is that the sole prop has a separate EIN number, and that also too, there's a fictitious business name tied to the sole proprietor. But if you are established as a sole prop, we can work with you. You just have to have a fictitious business name filed, and then also a separate EIN number or employee identification number with the federal government in order for us to work with you as a sole prop.
I'm an LLC, but are sole proprietors able to get an EIN because they don't have articles? They don't have to file articles of organization or anything, do they?
Well, that's where the fictitious business name filing comes into play. So similar to an article filing, you file a fictitious business name as ABC Company, and then you apply for an EIN number, which you're filing your taxes under. So the company itself would be, again, it's kind of one step removed from the individual, but I could be Daniel Lozier doing business as ABC Corporation, and my EIN number for tax purposes is separate than my social security number, if that makes sense.
It does. I just didn't know if you were able to get the EIN without established everything else. But thank you.
Yeah,
definitely can. And we just require the DBA, but you can actually, just with your name, Jonathan, you can actually file an EIN as well. Even for as simple as you have to pay a nanny, and that you got to pay 1099, or simple as that, you actually have to go and file an EIN to be able to do that. But yeah, you have the ability to do so as a sole prop.
And Fernando and Dan, Santosh has a question. Does the percentage vary if for some reason the customer has delayed payments?
Yes. So definitely we try to do our due diligence up front and understand what your payment cycle is going to look like. So we try to get it as close to what it's going to be. And then, but of course, things change, right? Delays happen, but you will know up front, hey, if we're planning on 45 days and here's what it's going to look like at 45 days, if it goes to 60, you'll know what it's going to cost to go to 60. We're not going to it's not going to be, well, surprise, you're at 60 now, so it's, you know, 3 times as much. I mean, it's a very systematic, you know, kind of scale that you're going to know exactly, like, okay, here's my cost at 30 days, here's my cost at 45, here's my cost at 60, and we will put that all in writing for you, and you'll know up front. But yes, to simply answer the question, yeah, if it's a longer term and, you know, the payment gets delayed, it will definitely have an impact on the overall cost.
Okay. And Jules has a question. Can we have access to the live recording session for future reference and a copy of the presentation?
Yeah, absolutely. We will provide a copy of the presentation, and I think Danny responded there. We're actually going to provide a link to the recording as well, and I think he puts it on YouTube and everything. So you will have access to all of that information. All right. Any other questions? Well, actually, you know, we're pretty much out of time. I want to make sure we do our last part here. And if there are any other questions, my contact information will be listed at the end. Feel free to email me directly. But as I said, we're going to do a little bit of trivia here for some gift cards for Amazon. So I'll throw out the first question, and just in fairness, in order to make sure, you know, everybody gets a chance to answer, just please answer in the chat, and Jeff will be monitoring the chat. So as he sees the first one to actually throw out the answer, that'll be the person who wins the gift card. And then if you can just chat privately to Jeff your email address, and then he'll make sure to get that gift card over to you through your email. All right. So hopefully you were paying attention. Here's some good trivia questions for you. So when was primary funding founded? And again, please go ahead and just type that into the chat.
All right. Jonathan was first at 1995, and that is correct.
Nice.
All right.
Nice job, Jonathan.
Jonathan, if you want to just private message your email to Jeff, and he'll make sure that you get the gift card. And so in fairness, what we'll do now too is we'll say, Jonathan, you've won your card. If you can refrain from answering any other questions, we want to make sure we have more than one person that gets to win a gift card. All right, so number 2 here. What is the asset that primary funding lends against?
Okay, Jules said AR, and Santosh said invoice.
Yeah, I mean, they're really both correct answers. So who was first?
Santosh had it first with invoice.
Awesome. All right, congratulations, another winner. Hopefully, Jules, maybe you'll get it on this next one here. We got one more question. Primary funding turns your accounts receivables into what?
Jules got it. $, cash.
Cash. That's right. We do turn your accounts receivables into cash. Great. Thank you, guys. I really appreciate all of the participation. Hopefully you found this informative. Again, my contact information is here. We will send out the deck as well, and the link to the recording. But if you have any questions, or you want to set up some further time to discuss potential financing options, or you just have questions in general about any of our programs, feel free to reach out to me by cell phone or email, and I'll be happy to schedule some time to discuss. But again, thank you all for joining us. Really appreciate it. I'll turn it back over to Danny. Danny, you there? All right, maybe Danny's a little bit busy, so I don't know.
Sorry about that. I had to take a call.
Oh, no worries.
Good. So I appreciate you guys. You did a fantastic job. I really appreciate everybody. Enjoyed the trivia towards the end. I think there were some great questions. As I said, we'll be emailing out the presentation and a recording.
Awesome. And Jules, I'm not sure if you did send your email to Jeff, but please send it to Jeff so he
Oh,
can.
I think I sent it to Jonathan.
Jefferson is who you want to send that over to and make sure we get those cards out.
Yeah, and Danny, you'll have everybody's email as well, correct?
Yeah, I think he's on a call. So hopefully we'll just give it a minute for Jules to send you her email and then we'll end it.
Fernando, I was gonna put your number in there, but you turned the screen.
Oh, sorry. Let me go back and share that again real quick here. All right, there you go.
All right, cool. Are you guys' office open, or do you have an office, or is it all based?
Yeah, we're based out of Rancho Bernardo, and we're definitely open. We tend to do most stuff virtually nowadays, but you're always welcome to come out and meet us in person.
Okay, nice.
All right, did you get that email, Jeff?
Yeah,
I need to send my email to Jeff. I
Okay.
guess, so.
and it looks like Santosh has not sent me his email yet either. Santosh, are you still on?
I'm on. I'm gonna send it to you right now.
Okay, thank you.
All right. I think it was really good. I really appreciate you guys giving us all this and answering the questions like you did. You couldn't have answered the questions if they weren't asked by some people, so it was good, both sides. So I think it was really good. I appreciate it, and I'll give you guys a call because I got all kinds of mess that could get help from you guys. So, well, thank you guys very much, and I'll see some of you in the future.
Thank you,
Okay,
Jonathan.
thanks so
Jonathan,
much,
appreciate
Jonathan.
your participation.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.
I'll be in contact with you guys as well. Probably, I'm thinking January or February when we, within 3 months of maybe being able to bill, or 4 months. What would you suggest?
That would be good. Yeah, at least 90 days would be good, just because it does take some time to structure anything in the healthcare field.
Okay, 90 days out. Thank you so much. I'll calendar it.
Thank you, Jules.
Okay, thank you, Jules.
How much is the gift card?
$25.
Hey, thank you. Have a great day, gentlemen.
You too.
Have a good one.
All right, you got them all, Jeff?
Bear with me just 1 second here.